Strategic lawsuits against public participation, also known as SLAPs, have become a worrying part of the legal landscape in recent years. Usually instigated by the rich and the powerful, their objective is to gag any potential critics of their conduct by forcing them into a protracted and expensive legal dispute. And regrettably, the UK has become the world's top destination for these assaults on free speech. The media lawyer David Hooper has written a book, Buying Silence: How Oligarchs, Corporations and Plutocrats Use the Law to Gag Their Critics. And David joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
David, I'm very interested in this subject because a lot of rich people, I've heard about oligarchs in London, effectively throwing a lot of money via the courts, through their lawyers, to keep people quiet, just their critics. Is that really going on?
Yes, I mean, when you bring a libel action, you're meant to do it because you want to protect your reputation.
Yes.
And to prove that something said about you was false and perhaps to get some damages to mark the gravity. But these guys were doing it because they'd been sanctioned or because they'd been indicted in the States or just because they basically did not want you to know about it. So you've got drugs companies going after individuals. There's one old Scottish professor who showed that their drug trials were a fraud. It was a classic SLAP case.
And is the idea here that if you throw enough money at something, because these people have so much money, they don't, even if they lose at the end of the process, it doesn't really matter because they've put off other potential critics because they see what's going on. They think, well, I don't want to be sued.
Yes, well, a great mistake is to think that because of Ukraine war, all the Russians have gone away. I mean, that is true obviously to a certain extent, but it still goes on. I mean, a case has just ended against a former MP where she was sued over a memorandum sent to 13 people, and the cost must have been about 3 or 4 million. If it had gone to trial, it would have been 7 million. And it's not just the money. I mean, the strain that's put on you. She was put under surveillance. They had bad story. They even took photographs of her dog as well as
the dog is a risk.
The dog was used to identify her because they were interested to find out whether she was living with somebody or not.
It's kind of tricky though, isn't it? Because there comes a point. There is going to be some legitimate criticism of rich and powerful people, but there's also going to be slander. There's also going to be libel. There's also going to be unfair, not just criticism, but outright lies about people. Don't people have a right, however rich they are, to protect themselves against just defamatory lies?
Absolutely, because the press do obviously get it wrong. And sometimes they're inclined to think that because this chap's made so much money, he must be a crook. And there are other reasons why people get rich. But I mean, what I'm saying is that there should be a level playing field, because I agree entirely. Rich people obviously are entitled to their reputation, but so too are poor people, or not poor people, average, you and I.
Yes.
And we just can't get a look in.
No, well, it's expensive, isn't it? But I mean, I've seen examples of where, for example, when people smear J.K. Rowling as a fascist, which she absolutely is not. In fact, she's the opposite, of course. She's very anti-fascism. And she will get a lawyer's letter sent to someone, and in a few days you see a note up saying, I apologise for what I said to J.K. Rowling, and then she gets accused of stifling people's free speech. But they've lied about her, and I think that's fair.
If you've got a good claim, bring it. I'm saying that the cases should be inexpensive, easy to bring, and that everybody should put their cards on the table, because what people really want is swift justice and cheap justice.
Yes.
And if you cap the costs, because a lot of this is driven by the greed of these lawyers, and they make these cases unduly complicated. Because I was a media lawyer for, the best part of 50 years. And the great secret is it's not actually that complicated.
Oh, really?
But
the language would suggest
it is very expensive.
Yeah, so you're suggesting a cap on costs so that, level playing field. So you can criticise someone who's very, very powerful, and if they do bring a case against you, it's affordable to defend yourself. Absolutely,
and I'm also saying that right at the beginning of the case, that you should put it before the judge, and the judge decides, is it really necessary for this case? This is assuming that it's a big public interest case.
Yes.
You weigh up how likely, how important is it that he has a remedy and that he's used against, which is why libel action is a bit different from the average commercial dispute. It's the right of freedom of speech and also your right to information.
So can you give us any particular examples of where a slap has been imposed and there's been an injustice?
Well, the most scandalous one was Mr. Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, who it was known perfectly well. He'd been sanctioned and he'd even been indicted in the States for it. But he decided that, and he found English lawyers only too happy to take his rubles, to sue, saying that he had nothing at all to do with the Wagner Group and also with the Troll Factory.
So are you suggesting that that's a case that was a kind of open and shut case, but he took it on anyway? Is that what you...
Absolutely. And the awful thing is that there are always lawyers who are willing to take it. And what I'm saying, and I'm supported by this, by the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, is that people should really look into whether the case is a complete false case.
Are you suggesting that lawyers are interested in money? Because that strikes me as an outrageous comment.
Well, luckily, if you sort of say it of a large enough, a wide group, so if we don't name names, no, I mean some of them are just straightforward greedy, and
yes. Well, we hear of ambulance chasers, and we hear of like lawyers who are just basically they'll take on any case so long as they can make money out of it, irrespective of the ethics behind the case. You know. Well,
that's right, because a lot of them are specialists, and they are rather inclined to look at you and say, well, that's £100,000 walking in the door.
Yes.
Because very often people really would be... you don't have to sue for every bad thing said about you. And most of the bad things said about people have an element of truth in it.
Yes.
So actually, a good lawyer would say, well... it's marginal, but you perhaps shouldn't bother.
Well, that would be the right approach. I mean, you know, this is the balance with freedom of speech, isn't it? You know, if I sued everyone who said something nasty about me, well, I'd have no money left, actually, because it happens every day, every 10 minutes, if I'm honest, on social media.
You're assuming they'd always win.
I'm assuming they'd always win, yeah. No, but, you know, even when it's completely unjust, I just think, I'll just block them and move on. You know, you can't spend your whole life trying to, you know, address what idiots say about you. You know, you can't really do that, can you?
No, I mean, it is a dreadful thing to be on the receiving end of a libel. I've, funnily enough, been sued by somebody in Greece. Simply for a statement that I made in court when I gave evidence of Greek Supreme Court. And I've had a writ from him in Greece wanting 300,000 euros, which is far more that you'd win, even if you won the case.
Yes.
And he also says that I've committed criminal libel and perjury, which I think renders me liable for 3 years in jail.
Wow, OK.
Yeah, it's just purely to intimidate.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? The way in which courts can be weaponised, I would say, against people, because it is intimidating. You know, you get a letter through the post, a very official-looking letter from a lawyer, and it's frightening. And the overall effect of that, I suppose, is self-censorship for most media outlets, for most ordinary people.
You're absolutely right, because you hear about the big cases that go to court. What you don't hear about, it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
You don't hear about the eight ninths or whatever it is underwater.
Yes.
Where people just say, well, we can't really write about this guy. He's always issuing writs. You know, let's write a nice cosy story about bread and butter. And
exactly, and of course, the whole point of the media is partly to hold the powerful to account. But if people are so powerful that you dare not do it because they might bankrupt you, then democracy doesn't really work, does it?
Well, that's right. And it isn't just about politics. I mean, if there is a dangerous drug on the market, like the Sacklers drugs, the opioid drugs, or Halcyon, which was a sleeping pill. I mean, people were dying in industrial quantities.
Yes.
As a result of these drugs, and people should know about it.
They should. So what can be done? I mean, ultimately, it is difficult because we have the laws are the way they are. Can they be changed to achieve what you want to achieve, which is this level playing field idea?
I think they could be changed very, very easily, because you really want at the outset the judge to say, does this case really have to go on, or is there some way of resolving it?
Yes.
And I think most people would feel that's a pretty fair outcome, because they're not always going to sling the cases out.
OK, well, David Hooper, your book is called Buying Silence, and that's available now to buy. I'd urge everyone to buy it. David Hooper, everyone.
Thank you very much.